Well, as the hours and days roll by after the release of the redacted Mueller report trickles out across the country and around the world, we decided that we would take a look at what has happened so far and where this thing could be going. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, let me just start with this, and I'm going to stick to kind of generalities here in a sense, because events, as people chew through this report, are breaking so quickly that I don't want to look ridiculous in a couple of hours. And so, but it seems to me that when this report came out, the immediate response from the right was the president was acquitted, so to speak. And the immediate response from the left was, man, we need to lift this impeachment idea back out of the trash bin and take a look at it again. Bill, should the American public just basically say a pox on both of your houses? You were all just saying what you were going to say no matter what happened?
Well, just as a matter of principle, I'm in favor of the American people saying a pox on both your houses. It's a foundational principle of mine. So let's just look at the Mueller situation as it develops as of this recording. The media is in a feeding frenzy now because they found some things that were redacted that they think are significant. And again, I just qualify it once, I won't do it again. I haven't read the report. I'm not an attorney. I don't know what exactly is there or not there, but here are some things that make logical sense to me. The Attorney General would not have issued a statement, 2-3 weeks ago, saying that there was no evidence of collusion or cover-up if there had been any evidence of collusion or cover-up. I can't be expected to believe in this day and age that Bill Barr thought that there could be in the report damning evidence that he could black out and that redaction would never be uncovered. I just don't believe anybody's that stupid. And furthermore, I don't think Donald Trump would have been crowing as loud as he did if it turned out that there was still some kind of exposure. Now, we're talking about a legal standard of obstruction and collusion and all the rest of it. I am about as convinced as I can be, just from the outside, that there is no legal standard met. And that's all that matters. Now, what I hear a lot of, in fact, I see like this hyperventilation every time I go just looking around the web. There's like, here, CBS News, here are a list of all the cases where Donald Trump refused to comply with the investigation. Look, if somebody's accusing me of a lie, somebody's accusing me of being a racist or something, it's not my obligation to spend all of my time and effort helping these people prove this case. It's not that. And one comment I saw, again, it's a problem with the web. I would love to credit the people by name, but I saw a comment today that really sums it up, and that is that the Mueller report, through the portrayal of the press, has done something very, very good for the left and bad for the country. It's exactly what they did with the Kavanaugh hearings. They have moved the presumption of innocence off of the shoulders of the accused and onto the shoulders of the defense. In other words, it used to be that if you cannot prove that Donald Trump did these things, then he didn't do them. And if you think that he might have, and it looks like he might have, but you can't prove it, then the burden of proof is on the prosecution.
Well, and there's a reason why in court the expression is not guilty. It's not, the expression is not innocent.
No one said innocent. Correct.
Yes.
That's precisely correct. That's a great point to elaborate on just slightly. Our legal system, and by the way, that's the most you get, right? You could be as innocent as an angel. You are never proven innocent. You are proven not guilty. If you are in trial, if you go to trial in the first place, that means that somebody, presumably, and it works beautifully most of the time. There have been some cases of abuses, but in most of the virtually all of the cases, if you find yourself in a courtroom for a criminal charge, then there has been enough evidence to warrant the trial, or else they couldn't have gotten the grand jury vote. They just couldn't it just couldn't have even started. So there had to be enough evidence to warrant this thing going to trial. And so if the prosecution fails in the burden of proof, then you are found to be not guilty. You're not found to be innocent. It's a superb point. And that's strange, actually. It's actually kind of a beautiful and interesting thing. In a country where you have, pretty much uniquely in the world, the presumption of innocence, In other words, you are innocent until proven guilty. The best that you can get from a trial result is not innocent at all. Even though the presumption of innocence is with you, when the thing's over, you're not declared innocent. You're declared not guilty.
Because that's in relationship to a specific charge.
To a standard,
so
yes.
Let me ask you this
That's
then.
right.
So the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Representative Gerald Nadler, is releasing the subpoena that was already authorized about a month ago by the committee for the unredacted report. He is suggesting that there is evidence, and he wants to see the underlying evidence to the Mueller report, that there is evidence of obstruction. And Mueller was careful in the wording of his report. He didn't say that there was no evidence of obstruction. What he said was that there's no way to prove corrupt intent. And in order to get an obstruction charge, you have to prove corrupt intent. And the New York Times is portraying this whole thing as an unveiling of the deceptive atmosphere inside the Trump administration, in effect saying that the president would have been charged with with obstruction of justice, if not for some aides who prevented him from doing things that he wanted them to do, or just refused to do things that he wanted them to do.
So there was no legal standard of obstruction met in the report, according to Mueller.
Yeah, Mueller was saying basically that he couldn't establish corrupt intent, and that's the standard that he needs in order to prove the obstruction charge in this case.
Not guilty. Next case.
So,
what else do you say? What else do you say?
The
These are serious charges, and they're politically motivated charges. As a matter of fact, you can make the case that in terms of impact on society, I'm not talking about murder, obviously. Nobody was killed, unlike some other crime families that we could speak about. But seriously now, this is the most serious charge that can be leveled in our representative Republican democracy. The removal of the president is an enormously significant event, especially when that president was elected against the headwind of the deep state and the media headwind. So they had to prove that he was guilty, and they couldn't prove that he was guilty. So what they're doing now is they are continuing this horrific, divisive, nasty, mean-spirited attempt to continue to discredit Donald Trump and the people that voted for him by simply continuing to flog this dead horse and saying what the media is saying to the American people is, okay, look, so the report came back not guilty. We all know he did it, and here's some evidence that indicates that he was, not cooperating with this probe, and maybe he was actually trying to block the probe until some junior intern somewhere threw themselves between Trump and the political bullet. It's all part of this. If I were to give them more credit than they deserve, more moral credit, I would say that this was just simply sour grapes. I would say that the best case for the progressives on the Democratic Party now, the best credit you can give them would be that they are incredibly sore losers. But that's not what it is. It's not an emotional investment. It's not the guy saying to whoever it was either Bear Bryant or Joe Paterno, yeah, well, we got more first downs than you did. That's sour grapes. That's just being a bad loser, bad sport. I continue to believe that this is done on purpose. They know full well that there's nothing there that meets the legal standard, which means that there's nothing there. So, since there's nothing there, they're going to continue to insinuate that something is there, and they're going to continue to divide this country and open up this rift of hatred. And this is what they do, Scott. This is what they do for a living. It's how they work.
So this is the point of my next question, because really it goes a little further even than you suggested. The Mueller report didn't come in saying not guilty. The Mueller report came in saying not charged. There was not
that's even less evidence.
Yes, and so there was no American was charged with involvement in a Russian conspiracy to affect the 2016 election. No American was charged with obstruction of justice. No American was charged with perjury in this case. We had some previous unrelated charges of perjury of people surrounding the president, but in this case, Jared Kushner and the president's own son, Donald Trump Jr., sat for hours and answered questions for hours and didn't fall into one perjury trap. And so there are no charges in this case. Glenn Greenwald
right.
does a great job of reviewing all of this in a column that he did, and kind of taking the report piece by piece and explaining it, and I refer you to that. But Gerald Nadler understands something that you just pointed out. Impeachment, for example, is a political act. It's not a criminal code act. And he doesn't need the standard of conviction that you would have to have in a court of law in order to maintain this and drag this out. He only needs the implication that your president is not telling you the truth.
Okay, but if we look at it from what the actual legal outcome of the Mueller report is, the actual factual legal outcome of it, what they do for political purposes is political. Just because the Mueller report didn't find anything doesn't mean that there cannot be a move to impeach the president and the Congress. You're absolutely right. They're two separate things. But in terms of the chances of getting a conviction on Donald Trump, you have up here, as we said before, there has to be enough evidence for you to go to trial in the first place. And then once you go to trial, the burden of proof is for the prosecution to say that the evidence that we have, in addition to whatever arguments and evidence we can present, is enough to convince people beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this thing. So here's the conviction bar, and here's the going to trial bar, and Mueller himself says we don't have enough evidence to go to trial.
And as you understand, the real trial happens in November of 2020. So this isn't really a question of whether President Trump gets impeached or not. It's, can we keep this argument alive for long enough? Now, let me ask you, if you're Gerald Nadler, you're the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. There have only been a handful of people in history who've been that guy. It's a lofty position. You have a responsibility to tell the truth and to conduct things in a just manner. Let's say you know that in those redactions in this 448-page report, that there's nothing that would help you to even get an impeachment or even do anything to harm this president.
Oh, no. Hold on. Let's stop right there just for 1 second. It's a critical point.
Say, wait a minute, this isn't the truth.
It's a critical point. When you say there's not enough evidence to harm this president, you're wrong. The president is being harmed on an hourly basis. Every single time you see a talking head on television get lathered up about all of this, oh well, he tried to stop this and he almost did that is harming the president, and it's defamation in my mind because there's no legal basis for it. So your question then becomes, is this smart political strategy? I think it's insanely stupid political strategy, which is why the Democrats are doing it, and which is why I believe they'll continue to do it, and why I pray dearly and daily that they will.
Well, Bill, you only know one party that does stupider things politically than the Democratic Party.
Correct. Yes, that's right. If the Democrats if the Republicans ran unopposed, they would. If the Democrats ran unopposed, they would lose. Or win. I forget how that saw goes. It's a great line that I just
my point is, you've often criticized the Republican Party of their rhetorical and political ineptness in being able to take gifts that are handed to them and turn them into garbage.
Okay, so let's talk about the garbage now. Let's talk about how this plays out. We had discussions earlier before the report came out. We said there were signs that there's not going to be anything there. Then came the redacted report, and we said, no, there's nothing there. Now comes the unredacted report, and there's still nothing there. And the question this whole time has been, will the Democrats continue to do this? Last time we talked about this on the show, I think the title I put up on the card was how much more flogging can this dead horse take? Well, it turns out it looks like it's going to be able to take another 18 months of flogging. So what does this actually mean? What actually impacts the political landscape in the election in 2020? Does this mean that there were people who voted for Donald Trump before who now are not going to or are less willing to vote for Donald Trump? I cannot see a single case where that happens.
But he needs more votes than that.
Hold on. The people who voted for him are not going to be turned off by the fact that this report turned up with nothing. If the report had turned up with serious charges, that would significantly erode my support for the president, because I put the rule of law above politics. But it didn't. So this Mueller report does not do anything to take vote. I'm talking about in significant numbers. This does not do anything to take any votes away from Donald Trump. Does it do anything to take votes towards the Democrats? Well, the people who already hate Donald Trump hate him now more. I don't see how that's going to make much of a difference. But there is in the middle a group of people that are being constantly moved towards Donald Trump by this kind of behavior. And I don't think anybody has moved towards the Democratic alternative. And let's just take Jim Treacher, for example. He's a very strong anti-Trump conservative. And he basically has said after this, he said, and you wonder why people voted for Trump. I'm whatever he called himself. I'm a left-leaning socialist, cuck who blah blah blah. But this is disgraceful, and I'm voting for Trump. And so what we face when we're going into 2020 seems to me that Donald Trump has an excellent economic record to run for. I think he's got a strong national defense record to run on. Rather, he has. To the shock of everyone who elected him, moments of boorishness and vanity, which knocks me just off my perch every single time. And so what's the situation relative to 2016? It's so much better for Trump because nothing has been taken away from him, but the strong economy and the strong national security, all the rest of the things he's actually accomplished, are taking people who were either doubters or conservative, or let me rephrase that, Republican voters who were never Trumpers. I don't know a never Trumper from 2016 who is going to be a never Trumper in 2020. I personally don't know any. And so I think the things look just better and better and better for the president. And the more the media hyperventilates over this, the last shreds of credibility they have with the people in the middle just continue to evaporate.
Well, as you criticize the Democrats for flogging the dead horse and the media for continuing to keep this thing alive, let's be honest about this, Bill. In a hypothetical situation where all of this was happening to a President Obama, you'd be calling for the complete release of the unredacted report. You'd be calling for additional probes in Congress. You'd be calling the Attorney General a liar because he was hiding information, and you'd be demanding impeachment. So why should it be any different with the Democrats?
Let's take an analogous situation that actually happened. Now let's talk about Obama's birth certificate issue. I thought the birth certificate issue was a solid issue. And why, I don't know how long he held on to it. It was 2 years, 2.5 years or something before he released his birth certificate. Now, the certificate that was released, the so-called proof, was suspect in many ways. In other words, forget the original document. The document that he released about 2 years or whatever it was afterwards, just before the release of that book, the document that Barack Obama supplied as his birth certificate is extremely, extremely dicey and doubtful. It's very dicey and doubtful. But I stopped fighting that fight when that document was released, even though I don't believe in the document. I stopped fighting that fight because at that point I could perceive around me that this issue was settled. And even though I didn't believe it was settled to my satisfaction, certainly, I just didn't believe that the document he produced. That doesn't matter. It was so settled in the minds of the American people that it was time to drop the issue.
I don't think that's an analogous situation, though, because we're not talking about thousands of redactions. We're not talking about Mueller's conclusion that obstruction may have happened, but I can't prove it because we can't prove corrupt intent. We're not talking about the same kinds of potential criminal activity. It's a president who is, may or may not have been born where he said he was born.
Well, Scott, if the president wasn't born where he said he was born, then every single law that he signed into, every single legislation that he signed into law is null and void. It is a far greater impact than Donald Trump.
He was very young when that happened.
Well, there you go. Donald Trump could have been. He wasn't very young when it suddenly disappeared, and he wasn't very young. He was already president when he produced a document that claimed to legitimize him. I don't believe that document.
See, I think you're making a red herring argument here because you're trying to turn it into this birther thing, which is I don't think it's
no. The birther thing is precisely what I'm trying to say. Okay, this is precisely what I'm trying to say. I think there's a great deal of evidence that makes me believe that that's not a legitimate document, but that's not the point. I'm not a birther because I don't think that the argument can be won politically. When he produced that document, shady as it was, that was the end of the argument in the minds of 90% of the American people, and that's when it's time to be wise to give up the fight.
So the Mueller report about Barack Obama, you say at this point, okay, we're all clean. We walk away.
No. What I'm saying is, What I'm saying is, if the Democrats had enough sense, if they had as much sense as the Republicans, or maybe it's just lack of guts on the part of the Republicans. Scott, let me put it to you this way. I have suspicions about Donald Trump, let's say, and I think he colluded with the Russians, and I think maybe he committed treason, and I'm sure he covered up the fact after that. So here we are in 2019. These are the things I believe. I know. Why don't we launch a probe into this? Why don't we launch a probe into this in spring of 2019 and see what we can uncover? You've had your probe. You had 2.5 years, $50 million, 500 witnesses. As you say, perjury traps laid, endless numbers of cases where Jared and Donald Trump Jr. simply were baited into collusion with the Russians and turned it down. So they are not going to be smart enough to let this thing drop. Okay, I could be wrong about the birth certificate. Maybe it's a completely legitimate birth certificate. I'm not deep into the details of that, but to me, politically, it became a dead issue when he produced it, whether I believed it or not. And we had the good sense to drop this argument, even though I think there was something to it. Now, this is precisely analogous with where the Democrats are now, and they can make either the smart decision or they can make the Democrat decision. And the Democrat decision will be to continue to gin up their base and to continue to gin up this hatred and rage, and it's going to result in more conservative speakers being assaulted on colleges, and people wearing a Make America Great Again hat are going to be not only assaulted, some of them are going to be hurt badly, I suspect, in the years to come, because the media will not accept the fact that no matter what they think, they did not meet the burden of proof. Look, there is absolutely no question. I think any rational person at all on the earth understood that there was no question that O.J. Simpson was guilty of that murder, of those two murders. Absolutely none. Absolutely none. But the prosecution boggled the case so badly that the burden of proof was not met. And watching O.J. Simpson go free was a disgusting and agonizing process that I had to go through, like so many other people. But I had to console myself, as I always do in cases like this. I had to console myself that this is the price we pay for the presumption of innocence. We believe it's better to let 10 guilty people go than put one innocent person in jail. And virtually every other society in the world believes precisely the opposite. So you didn't meet the burden of proof. You did not rise to the fairly unique American standard that you have to prove I'm guilty. I don't have to prove I'm innocent. You failed. And if you want to continue to run on this failure, then I say, as a person who's not only diametrically opposed to progressive attitudes, but am into eternity. I expect to fight this in the afterlife as well, although I'll be at considerably higher altitude than most of those other progressives will be. So if you want to continue down this road, fine. But as far as I think I'm concerned, and as far I think as the movable percentage of voters is concerned, this issue is dead, and the more that they continue to flog it, the more sympathy they feel for Donald Trump, and the more they realize that these conservative complaints about media, forget bias. You want to talk about collusion and complicity and coercion. The marriage between the news media and Barack Obama's Justice Department is plenty of reasons. Look, last thing I'll say on this. I was talking with my wife about this, and she said somebody had met Donald Trump and blah, blah, blah. They said once the camera was off, he turned around, he stopped smiling, something like this, right? And she said, I don't think he's a very nice man. And I said, honey, I don't think he's a very nice man either. But he's our not nice man. And this is not well, they committed crimes, so we're committing crimes. If they had found evidence that was worthy of trial, if they had met the burden of proof, and it turned out that Donald Trump committed these crimes and misdemeanors worthy of impeachment, I would reluctantly, very reluctantly, say, well, if he committed the crimes, he has to pay the price. I have standards that cannot be violated by political whims. And then we'd have to live with President Pence for 2.5 years. And I think that would be quite a positive experience, actually. But they didn't. So my support for him goes up. It continues to go up. And every single time they try to make him guilty when they couldn't prove him guilty, my support for him, and I suspect a large number of people who voted for him the last time, find him even more attractive. And as I said before, a number of people who didn't vote for him last time find what he's done as attractive, and see more evidence every day that the man has been unfairly maligned and is the product of an elitist media government complex that is determined to enforce its will on the American people, whether the American people want it or not.
Well, putting those standards and principles to the test on a daily basis. This is Bill Whittle Now, and it's made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who've gone, as you may soon do, to that website and click that Become a Member link and signed up to contribute on a monthly or annual basis to fund this work. And when you do so, you wind up seeing 44 new videos every month, participating in a member-written blog, and having all kinds of communication avenues that help you participate in reasoned thought, intellectual debate, and frankly, a lot of fun. So I hope you take a moment right now and go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. It's for those members that we produce this, and we are grateful for it. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thank you very much.